Chapter 2, Mishnah 5. Having discussed in Mishnah 3 what is to be done with the surplus shekel and chatas money, the Mishnah disagrees. The Mishnah digresses to teach what is to be done with surpluses of money collected for other purposes. The Mishnah introduces its list by repeating the law regarding Shekalim. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. The surplus of money set aside for the shekel obligation is unconsecrated. If someone puts aside coins for a shekel obligation and finds that he has mistakenly set aside more coins than necessary, the extra coins are unconsecrated in accordance with Beis Hillel's opinion in Mishnah 3. The Mishnah continues its list. In all these cases, someone sets aside money for a specific purpose but finds that he has more money than he needs. The surplus of money set aside for buying the tenth of an ephah of flour used as a chatas offering, the surplus of money set aside for buying pairs of birds for the offerings of zavim, of zavos, and of women who have given birth, and the surplus of money set aside to buy animal chatas offerings and asham offerings. The surplus of money in all of these cases is placed in the temple chest marked voluntary communal offerings. The Mishnah sums up these cases with a rule. This is the general rule. Any money that comes to pay for a chatas offering or an asham offering, its surplus is placed in the temple chest marked voluntary communal offerings. This rule was derived from a verse by Yehoyada, the Kohen Gadol, as the Mishnah in chapter 6, Mishnah 6 will explain. Until now, the Mishnah has discussed cases where the surplus funds cannot be used for their originally designated purposes. Now the Mishnah lists cases where surplus funds are used for their designated purpose. The surplus of money set aside for an olah offering is used to buy another olah offering. The surplus of money set aside for a mincha, flour offering, is used to buy another mincha offering. The surplus of money set aside for a shelamim offering is used to buy another shelamim offering. The Mishnah continues its list. The surplus of money set aside for a Pesach offering is used to buy a shelamim offering. The surplus of money collected to purchase offerings for poor Nazirim in general is used to buy offerings for other poor Nazirim. That is, leftover money should be held until it is needed for other poor Nazirim. But the surplus of money of an individual Nazir who set aside money for his own offerings and had some money left over is placed in the temple chest marked voluntary communal offerings. Since the money was designated for a particular Nazir, it cannot be used for other Nazirim. Having discussed what is done with the surplus funds designated for various offerings, the Mishnah now turns to teaching what should be done with the surplus of funds collected for various charitable purposes. The surplus of money collected for poor people in general is used for other poor people when the need arises. But the surplus of money collected for the sake of a specific poor person is given to that poor person. The surplus of money collected for the redemption of captives in general is used for other captives when the need arises. But the surplus of money collected for the redemption of a specific captive is given to that captive. The Mishnah concludes with a discussion of what should be done with the surplus funds collected for burying the dead. The surplus of money collected for the burial of the dead in general is used to bury other dead people too poor to afford their own burial. The surplus of money collected to bury a specific dead person too poor to afford his own burial is given to his heirs. When charity is collected publicly for someone's burial, the deceased suffers a great disgrace. We can assume that he only forgave such a slight to his honor for the sake of his children or other heirs, and so the surplus money should go to them. A second opinion. Rebbe Meir says the surplus of money collected for a dead person must be set aside until Elijah the prophet comes at the end of days and passes judgment on this undecided point of law. Rebbe Meir is uncertain whether it can be assumed that the deceased forgoes his honor on behalf of his heirs. He therefore rules that no one may touch the surplus money until the issue is settled by Elijah the prophet. A third opinion. Rabbi Nassan says, With the surplus of money collected for a dead person, they build a monument for him upon his grave. Rabbi Nassan holds that the deceased certainly does not forgive his honor on behalf of his heirs. The surplus money must therefore go to honor him by building a monument or tombstone to perpetrate his memory.